Maybe to kick things off, I'll start with a really brief introduction, then we'll get started. So today's conversation, as you are well aware, is kind of around AI. Specifically speaking, how we can start to leverage some of the low-hanging AI tools that are available to us, both natively in Reviewr, but also, if you want to do these types of things offline, you can, and how it pertains to the review, judging, scoring process of your scholarships. Now, for many of you, you may be doing other use cases, grants, fellowships, recognition awards. These concepts all are relevant to all of them. And obviously, AI has been in the news a lot for the last few years. And really over the last year or so, we at Reviewr have been trying to look at how do we start to leverage some of these really powerful features and tools in a very ethical way, in a very secure way from a data security perspective, to not just be a buzzword, but actually practically using AI to better these types of programs like scholarships. And so everything that we're going to look at today is built into Reviewr. It's happening live right now. These are real use cases. I will show and preview some examples of how it's being done. For those who are current clients of Reviewr, what I'm going to show you, just for the sake of time, is like the next generation of our judging and scoring portal. So again, these features and tools are available live now. What I'm about to show you is more in a condensed version for the sake of everybody's time here today. I'll keep it to about 30 minutes. So really briefly, just to kind of introduce myself and why this is an important concept. So we built Reviewr back in about 2012. What makes us very unique is our team kind of comes from funding operations. So served on volunteer review committees for these funding types of programs. And way back in time, as you can imagine, they're all done through paper. So we'd have literal binders physically mailed to us. Our team was tasked with, judging and scoring them, and more specifically trying to offer feedback and insights into why we scored the way we did, in hopes of having a compliant process, but also hoping that that feedback makes its way back to the applicants. Over time, technology started to improve. A lot of organizations spun up, built-in web forms, emails, spreadsheets, a lot of downloading of documents. And that's kind of where Reviewr was born from, as a way to take all these moving parts and put them into a dedicated end-to-end platform that covers the entire spectrum of scholarship operations, from application all the way through both the selection and post-selection workflows for your scholars or for your grantees. So today, again, we're not going to dive deep into overarching Reviewr. I want to focus very specifically on the term Reviewr, because that's what we were built to do, is help you guys get from submission down to decision. So when it comes to AI, Reviewr has a very robust and I guess innovative roadmap ahead of us on how we want to incorporate AI tools for you guys as scholarship operators. Today, we're going to focus primarily around like summarization of submitted content by applicants, and how we can leverage those summarized data points to have a more fair, efficient review and selection scoring process. For those who are kind of curious, our roadmap, again, is pretty ambitious. AI content detection from an applicant's perspective, agnostic bots that basically become extensions of your team to operate both more efficiently, but also kind of take your scholarships to the next level with automated reminder messages and like workflow automations and things like that. So again, not today's conversation, but just kind of keep that in the back of your mind that 6 months from now, AI is going to be in a much different place than it is now, which is going to unlock a lot of additional capabilities and features. So coming back to the judging and scoring process, to kind of set the stage, as we all know, from application to selection, a lot of things have to happen. And the key term there is called volunteer fatigue. As a volunteer review committee for a scholarship program, you're asking them to do a lot of stuff. And I think a lot of times that we forget that these are a lot of times volunteers. And even if they're full-time staff, doing this, there's other obligations that they have to do. And we often forget that volunteers have an actual dollar amount associated with them. And right now it's about $35 an hour is the national average. And while you may not be paying them, that time still means something. And so let's just use simple math here today. If you had 100 applications and you say, hey, committee, go review all 100 of these submissions, and they're spending, even 10 minutes a piece, we're talking about multiple hours per person over the course of the program. And so even incremental small movements, dropping it down from 10 minutes to 5, moves the needle tremendously. For future conversations, I think there are a lot of best practices around how you structure your review process. So again, using my example, if you had 100 submissions, like don't ask one volunteer to review 100, instead break that workload where each one looks at maybe 20 randomly. So there's a lot of things that we can do from a pure operations perspective to lower volunteer fatigue. But at the end of the day, we're not all in the fortunate position where we have, infinite staff sizes and we can do things like that. And we are asking our volunteers to take on a pretty heavy load. So what can we do right now that kind of keeps the integrity of the program, yet still lowers the barrier for your volunteers and your committees? But then also equally, if not more important, is how do we equip them for success where the most qualified scholars are getting the fair opportunity that they deserve? And that's kind of where we start to inject some of these AI concepts. So today, again, I want to keep this to about a 30-minute conversation. I'm going to focus on three key areas. Again, right now, Reviewr powers all three of these. Two of which I think are things that I would highly recommend right now for every single one of you. The third element there is a bit more polarizing. It's a bit more out of the box, but I do think that it has its purpose. And it also is going to be something that we really need to start to consider here moving forward in the future. The first of which is going to be applicant summaries. And I'm not going to go deep right now into all of these. We're going to spend some time going through each one of them. But basically, how do we take these complex scholarship packets, right? Resumes, reference letters, transcripts, and their applications with their essays, and condense that to a much more manageable piece of content for the review team. So again, instead of saying, hey, evaluator, go look at all these things, right? Spend 25, 30 minutes. How do we help you spend 5 minutes? But still give them the data that they need to make an informed decision. The second thing, which is my personal favorite, is how do we use AI to basically structure your scholarship information in a way that aligns with your criteria and your scorecards and what you're looking for in a scholar, helping the review team stay very focused on what they should be looking at for each scorecard prompt, but then also how do we help them not miss really critical details that certainly will move the needle just because it's nested in the third paragraph of a resume, not up and center within the form. And then the third thing we'll look at, which is the more polarizing thing, and again, I want to open this up for conversation, is how do we leverage AI to kind of give you a pre-ranking or a pre-score? By no means is this meant to replace humans. What this is meant to do is equip humans with maybe knowledge or data going into it to make sure that they are on the same page. Maybe there's something that they missed that the AI didn't, or even vice versa, right? It's also a way to kind of help narrow down a large applicant pool to a much more smaller volume that you want to spend more time on. So those are kind of three quick introductions. Let's dive into all three of them. Like I mentioned before, I do have the chat pulled up. I did drop in my calendar. So if anyone wants to spend more time practically looking at how these would apply to your specific workflows, would love to have that conversation. Or if there's just other elements of scholarship operations and Reviewr. More specifically, though, if you guys are currently using AI at all with your programs, it could be to help identify AI content detection. It could be from an operational perspective. Please do toss it in the chat. I'm very fascinated by the topic. Like I mentioned, we've got a pretty robust, ambitious roadmap ahead of us. And so I would assume we're working on a lot of these things, but if you have additional ideas, I'd love to hear from them. Also, any sentiment or feedback as we go through these, if any of these concepts you think might apply to you, give us a quick thumbs up. I'm just kind of curious to see, are we on mark or are we off mark? So let's spend some time going through the first one, and that's applicant summaries. So the general premise behind this is to leverage all the data we're collecting from a scholar, that's both in the scholarship application, plus all of the supporting documents, which for many of you are going to be different. Could be parent tax returns for financial aid-based scholarships, could be resumes, recommendation letters, transcripts, essays, things like that, or the forms itself, and take all of that and condense into something that's very bite-sized, but also very impactful for the review team. So kind of going out of order here, but again, like without AI summaries, what basically happens, and I'm going to make assumptions that you all use Reviewr. Obviously, not all of you do. When you come into the system, right, you're presented with a split screen. So as a reviewer, you're able to see on half of your page the comprehensive scholarship packet, forms, files, notes, communication, whatever you want to share with them. And then the other half of the page is your scorecards and your judging tools. So for those of you that are a bit more manual, that might be spreadsheets and emails, it might be Google Drive links. So the value proposition goes up pretty tremendously just by having that split screen. The challenge is that even using the most innovative, user-friendly tools like Reviewr, your team still needs to physically read through the application, go to the file uploads, view them, extract the relevant information out, go to the scorecard, fill out the score sheet, and they rinse and repeat. And if they're looking at one or two scholars, probably fine, even though they still are volunteers. When you're looking at 20, 30, 40, 50 plus, or thousands for some of you, every single minute starts to count. And so again, the goal here is to make it in a fashion where we're giving them the essential information that they need for judging and scoring, nothing else, nothing more, and then basically aligning it with their scorecards. So again, I do want to visualize that. Like I mentioned before, this is the next version of Reviewr. So for those of you who are current clients, you're getting kind of a sneak peek behind the curtain. Hopefully you're very excited about this. But again, everything that we're looking at exists right now within the app. But the general idea here is as a judge, they basically are presented with a list of all of these scholar applicants that they're looking to look at. This is a pretty simple example. There's no data redaction going on. We're showing them everything. Again, Reviewr does have some built-in data redaction capabilities. But as a judge, they simply click into the name or ID of the scholar that they want to review, and then they're given a split screen. So again, out of the box before AI, what's going to happen here is I, as a judge, am supposed to evaluate, in this case, James, on multiple metrics, right? I'm ranking and scoring his academic achievements, his extracurriculars, leadership roles, essays, overall impressions, right? And leaving comments. So even in a very user-friendly tool like Reviewr, I'm scanning on this left-hand side. I'm reading their essay prompts. I'm reading all this information that the applicant submitted. From there, I'm going to jump over to my file uploads. Maybe I want to check out this resume. I open it up. Obviously, we lower the barrier by embedding it in Reviewr side by side, but I'm still, as a human, having to manually read literally everything. So what does a summary version of this look like? We can go ahead and jump up to the top here, and I can toggle from the full view to the summary view. And like I mentioned, I preloaded here 3 different summary models, again, for the sake of today's conversation, but I'm going to go ahead and choose the first option. And what you can kind of see here is a very condensed yet powerful version of this applicant's form. So again, we have James, and everything that you're looking at here on the side is being pulled from the assets that we received. So we're able to pull from their submission form, we're able to pull from their essays, we're able to pull from their letters of recommendation. And then we start to create a high-level synopsis or summary of who James is as a candidate, highlight key bullet points that we want the review team to not miss, right? These are the essentials that our team has to look at. We're summarizing some of their academic achievements. We're summarizing their letter of recommendation. And then as a judge, I can basically side by side either toggle back and forth between the full form and the summary view and start to fill out the score sheet. So kind of jumping back, and I'm going to go on to the next one because that's the one that I'm most excited about. What does this mean for you? So at the end of the day, I think the main goal here is that for high volume programs, I'm talking like multiple hundreds into the thousands, your job isn't to get from application to decision in one pass. Your job is to take this large applicant pool, narrow it down to a much more manageable number of those that are highly qualified, those that are greater than 60% success rate. And then for those, you're going to spend the human time analyzing their transcripts, reading their recommendation letters, reading their essays, and going through a formal judging process. So where the AI summary comes into play is you can lower the time on the judge's end by basically using summaries instead of forms and files. And it serves as a first pass of yeses and nos. We want this candidate to move on to a second round where we're going to spend substantially more human time analyzing all of their content. That's where I think the most practical use comes into play. With that said, we do have many clients that right now who have much smaller volume who are basically saying, hey, look, these summaries are actually giving us the ample data that we need to maybe not make final selections, but at least narrow it down to maybe the top 5, right? So it does work really well. For every one of you, though, I think that this next bullet point is what I would implement right away starting tomorrow. And what this is basically a way to use AI to restructure the applicant content in a way that makes way more sense for the review team. So to kind of set the stage here a little bit, you generally speaking have scorecards or elements that you're looking for in a scholar. I'm a huge advocate of scorecards. They don't have to be complex. I do believe having a rudimentary scorecard or a rubric with guiding principles for your committees is essential to an efficient, fair review. We want to make sure that it's consistent. We want to make sure that every one of your reviewers is looking at the applicants through the same lens and comparing that against certain criteria or elements that you as an organization are looking for in a scholar. With that said, if we go back to my example over here, and I'm going to stay on this example, we're asking them to score this applicant on roughly 6 or 7 different questions: academic achievements, extracurriculars, leadership, and community service. The problem with this is, as a judge, the answers to academic achievement live in a lot of different places. So if I go back to my full submission form view, academic achievement lives in their essays, it lives in their long form content, it lives in their essays, it lives in their transcripts, it lives in their references. So if you say on a scale from poor to exemplary, how am I supposed to even know what information makes up academic achievements? So the idea going back to this tool is we then say, hey, using our scorecard and our criteria, analyze this comprehensive applicant packet, again, forms, files, notes, everything, and pull out all the essential information that corresponds with each of the scorecard prompts. So again, going back to this example, I'm basically going to prompt it by saying, hey, go find everything that's relevant to academic achievement. Find me everything that's relevant to extracurriculars. And why that's really important is what happens if in the form you have like, hey, tell us more about your volunteer hours or tell us more about your extracurriculars. And they give you just a little bit of information. But if we were to open up their resume, maybe at the very, very, very bottom, there's one line item here that's really, really important, right? We cannot allow a review team member to miss that because they as humans will. It's just the nature of who we are. So again, we're basically saying, go find me everything relevant to extracurriculars. And then what does that look like from a summary perspective? So if I jump over to the scorecard alignment, what we basically did is we created little sub buckets or categories. Each one of these aligns with your scorecard. So number one is academic achievement, and then boom, academic achievement, extracurriculars, extracurriculars. And then when I open this up, we are now summarizing every piece of data, and it tells you where it's coming from. So it's being pulled from the application form, the transcript, the first essay, and the recommendation letter. And it's telling us what elements here should be considered for the scorecard prompt. So now I, as a judge, am saving a substantial amount of time not having to sift through a bunch of stuff. And B, what if this small little sentence here in the recommendation letter moves the needle from average to above average, right? Same thing goes for all the other elements here. So we have extracurriculars, leadership roles, their essays, themes, overall impressions. So nothing changes. We're still using your forms. We're still using your scorecards. We're still using your file uploads. But again, we're just restructuring in a way that's substantially more accurate and more efficient for the review team. So again, I'm going to move on. If you have any comments or chats or anything that you want to address, toss it in there. The last one I'm also pretty excited about, but this is where it's a bit more polarizing. And this is using AI to basically do both of the things that we just said, but then take it one step further. And we say, great, now that we know everything that goes into academics, everything that goes into the essays or financial need, let's now take that data and let's leverage our scorecard and maybe other things that you have, and let's start to actually give your team a pre-rank or a pre-score. Now, again, this is where it's polarizing. By no means are we here to replace humans. Although I do think that there is a world here in the future where with enough data, enough historical track record of who you funded in the past, we will be able to give you very accurate scores as a prelim judging model. But again, AI is what it is. We don't want to lose the human element to these programs. Everybody looks at applicants maybe through a different lens. And so at the end of the day, we still need humans to review the outputs and confirm like this is in alignment with what we're looking for. So worst case situation right now, we basically use AI to take their content, analyze it, look at the score sheets, look at other applicants, and then return to a pre-rank. And then at that point, what's basically happening is the review team is looking at that. They're still filling out their own scorecards. But as they're doing that, maybe they want to make some changes because AI identified something that they didn't, or maybe it was wrong and they want to keep to their score. And then as the results come in, you can actually have two different kind of scorecards. You can have the AI generated one versus the human one, and then use that to power very insightful meetings. Best case situation, which I don't think is now, I think it's still years in the future, is we do the same process, but then we find out that the AI scoring actually either A, aligns with what human said, or B, it caught things that human didn't, and it's actually more accurate. So again, by no means do we want to replace humans, but I do think there is a time and place. So let's go back and let's click on what that could look like. So we basically, in this case, have pre-rank. And what it's basically doing here, again, is the prompting is the critical piece to this, and it's what's going to make everything go. But we're giving you still maybe a summary of the application, and you can layer all three of these on together, but basically giving you a summary. And then for each criteria, we're breaking down academic achievement. We're going to score this a 90 out of 100. And by the way, here's why we scored it a 98. Again, with enough data, you can start to train this with maybe historical records. With enough data, you can also then have it compare one applicant to another. So I do think that like there's a huge future potential for this, but I'm going to continue to reiterate that it's not meant to replace humans. It's meant to give them insights that they may not have had going into it. And two, no matter what model you use, I still believe that it requires a human to look at this stuff, audit it, and confirm accuracy, right? Like it's not 100% accurate. We can't expect it to be, and we have to keep the humans into it.